Detailed notice about the user advisory group activity. So we talked about the advisory group starting recently. That basically had to do with the just like who's going to be in it, how often they were gonna group up, you know, that kind of stuff is basically what they were talking about, right? What kind of stuff they were going to talk about, how they were going to get to the topics in the future, you know, based on previous meetings, based on input from the discussion boards and KMS, right? All of that. Except for these, I can clip on the go. So with that being said, let's see what they have to say now. More details, answer to questions that users had. Separate the important posts section on the sidebar into updates and notice because the sheer number of them being released now. Lol. Yeah, it's probably a lot. So they have I learn. I just go into the VOD and then just start clipping by myself and then upload them as individual clips and then export them individually to YouTube. We've identified various concerns about the future activity. Since this is our first attempt to add activity like this in MapleStory, we decided that there were areas which were not sufficiently considered, and so we have reviewed the user advisory group activity again. We decided this was necessary to explain the content to players in more detail and give more information about the significance of the user advisory group and the activity plan. User advisory group system significance. Why was it needed? Why were the customer conference representatives made into the user advisory group? Why are Nexon employees leaving necessary work to the user advisory group? Wait, don't you guys want input? The user game has been in service for 18 years, and an unkind game environment still remains from maintaining content and settings which were developed a long time ago. Therefore, the core task of the development team for this year is to provide a more pleasant environment for enjoying the game through rapid improvements. In doing this, we think that it's essential to move away from developers' perspective and towards player perspectives. You want both, right? The simple answer is you need a healthy balance of players' inputs and developers' inputs. You need both. You don't want the players to just get everything they want because they might just want everything completely for free and super simple, and then it might destroy your whole game. You don't want the devs to only come up with things that maybe don't play the game as much and have these idealistic thoughts of this is how it'll turn out and it's going to be perfect, and then it turns out years later it was a shit show the whole time because there was no communication. You need healthy balance of what it is. Yeah. You want to give the players what they need, not what they want. And the problem is, a lot of times, players will think convey what they think they want or what they think is necessary. But the result will be, I think, that you don't want to give in too much, but you also don't want to give in too little. You do kind of need to give in a bit, right? Because the players are the ones who are ultimately going to play the game. You want them to feel like they are, like they feel like it's valuable that they spend their time on your game, right? That is the important thing. Because if they don't feel that, they stop playing, you know, your game crumbles, player base is gone, that whole thing. So although we received various opinions from players through the discussion board, its current structure is functionally limited and is still used for users to confirm their opinions about things they feel uncomfortable about rather than actual discussion. We heard you organize a discussion board for smooth discussion with the players, but they did mention that they were going to do that. To come up with solutions to the various problems in the game more quickly and the current situation. Efficient discussion is required. In this case, we decide that we need to urgently find a group composed of people who know MapleStory's current situation well. I feel like this was all self-explanatory, but I guess there were a lot of questions that people had on the KMS message board that they were addressing with this. 10 representatives who participated in a customer conference each have high game understanding and play experience in various fields, and we confirmed that they did their best to listen to the opinions of as many people as possible and understand the current situation when collecting the various game problems and improvements plans for the customer conference. Yeah, I think that's all reasonable. So since the issues which currently require the most urgent improvements are related to the content discussed at the previous customer conference, we decided to organize the 10 participants from the customer conference, representatives, and quickly begin the user advisory group's activity. And like I said, I think this is a good idea. You probably want to rotate the people in there every now and then. You don't want to have the same people, you know, have some kind of alpha status for like a super long time and start to like dictate who gets to tell them what to do and what they get to convey through to the dev team, right? You want to make sure that that stays on a rotation, that people don't get rusty in there, and that then you know, as someone's life changes and they don't have the time to allocate to having that level of responsibility and to being as engaged fully with that role, that it should free up, and you know, you want to have representation from the different fields within the game. I think that's a general thing to think about with all of that. User advisory group's role. What work does the group do? I don't think it's good for the game if certain users can influence the development direction. That's a interesting opinion. I hope that user advisory group will simply collect user opinions and deliver them to the development team. There's always going to be a filter, right? People are always going to look at things through certain bias, through certain goggles. They're going to look at a certain problem based on what they run into and based on what they hear the most. And what they hear the most is going to be filtered through who are vocally, like who are reaching out and who are just the loudest people that are talking about these issues, right? User advisory group's role is to share their opinions to development team to improve the game. If necessary, improvement opinions will be presented based on the development information, and opinions will also be presented after in-depth discussion through things like occasional communication with the developers. If the role of the user advisory group is narrowed down to the deliver of opinion collected from the discussion board of community, we think that it would be difficult to have effective discussions based on users' voices. We would like to create an environment where we can hear and discuss more in-depth stories from users' point of view. Exactly. Right? If they wanted to have these people just be like, oh, this is what the people told me, then they could just be reading the discussion board, because that's already what the people are saying and what the people are caring about on a discussion board. They want to have more. They would want to just have more. What about the people who don't go to the discussion boards? What are people who look at streams? What are people who comment on YouTube videos? Right? What are common things that are said there? What mixed that with the player expectation and with talking of the person in game, their communications with people in the game, their experience in the game, right? All of that amalgamated into one experience. That is the opinion they also want to hear, and not just what does the community think at large, because again, that's just what the discussion board is already for. So I think that's an excellent point. Finally, the development team will determine the development direction based on discussion information from opinions gathered by the advisors, as well as the opinions of many players from things like the discussion board and the customer center. So the discussion board is forming as the information that will determine what kind of topics are we going to talk about, and then the discussion board information and the player board information and the development team is all going to come together, and that is going to determine the direction, right? It's not just so much, oh, this one person on the committee said that, you know, the attack speed for Angelic Busters needs to go up, so let's just do that, right? It's never going to be that simple, right? It's always going to have feedback loops. It's going to have, you know, KMS test PR runs, and it's also typically going to be small changes over time, because if you want to move from 1 to 10 on something, sometimes you think you need to move from 1 to 10, but sometimes just moving it to 4 first and then seeing how that plays out. Maybe it turns out that moving that to 4 moves some other pieces around that you didn't even foresee would be moving around, and that moves the character actually like already almost right there where you want it, and maybe then you need to move it from a 4 to a 4.5, and then boom, you're done. If you move it from 1 to a 10, and this is what we saw when they moved the final damage multiplier from, let's say that the 1 was that it just gives you percentage damage, and the 10 is it gives you final damage. Well, what they saw was that the 1 was too low and that the 10 was too high. But that doesn't help at all, right? Because you need to know, is it closer to a 3 or is it closer to an 8, right? So sometimes moving it from one extreme to the other doesn't help you at all. You need to move it a little bit, and then you'll get pushback, and people will say like, oh, that's not enough. Of course that wasn't enough. But you need to pinpoint somewhere in the middle and then see, okay, do we need a little bit more, a little bit less, right? You're way more likely to be closer to where you need to be with a moderate change than with a huge change, because that will have unforeseen trickle down and ripple effects that unforeseen, and they might have even worse consequences because of that. The detailed development direction will not be determined only by the user advisory group's activity, and for the detailed development direction and schedule, the user advisory group will get information at the same time as the players. When the homepage announcement or release note is updated. Okay. So they're not going to get like way ahead of time info. What development information will be shared with the user advisory group? What kind of information will the user advisory group receive? Why can't the information be released entirely? Wouldn't there be problems if the game or the information is shared only with the user advisory group? I think these are like legitimate questions, but I think you can already pretty quickly answer everything. Is because you want to keep some things secret, not because you don't want to tell the player base, but just because as soon as some kind of word goes out, like, nothing stays exactly the way that you intended it to be heard. As soon as you open it up to the public, you know, rumors and whatever the fuck will start, and it'll become completely different. So let's see what they say about this specifically. Going forward, the topics to be discussed with the user advisory group will be the 11 topics that were mentioned in the video before. And if there are any additions or changes, we will share them through another notice. Basically, in user advisory group's activity, it will take place with only known information for areas where shared development information is not required. However, in situations where we need more in-depth opinions, information may be shared in limited situations where we think decisions should be based on development information. And this is what we mentioned before, where they'll have to sign basically like NDAs as part of the advisory group to make sure that they don't share that information with the player base yet, especially when it's proprietary or when it's not confirmed yet that it is going to be in fact released into the game, because you know that can just cause like panic, speculation, all that kind of stuff. The information that will be shared with the user advisory group is recent or past statistical information related to the topic being discussed. Future update plans or specific directions for in-game improvements will not be shared. Even for past information, we will not share sensitive information which could be used to pursue benefits in the current game economy. Yeah. That's actually another thing I hadn't even thought about, but yeah, of course, they can't give you like a bunch of information, because that would basically be like insider trading within the MapleStory market economy or something. That would be really weird, huh? Yeah, I feel that pain too with the transposing setting. Examples of shared information. To have more direct opinions on the topic of alleviating character growth difficulty, we would share statistical information based on past and present data on the past level of difficulty alleviations improvement record of speed when achieving a level N through K. So yeah, 1 through whatever. We will not share data or update directions related to things that have personal benefits, such as value of held items or expansion of held assets, which have little impact on the game. Nevertheless, the reason why the same information cannot be shared with everyone is that basically development information must be guaranteed with corporate confidentiality. If the information was publicly released, it would spread to not only MapleStory users but also externally. MapleStory's long accumulated data and development know-how may be leaked, so we are approaching this with caution. Basically, this means that other games will get like competitive advantages, because if no one in industry releases all of these numbers, because it gives away a huge thing. Like if one game is like pretty popular but it's like wavering a little bit, and they show specifically like, hey, this is where we fall short, another game will like hardcore start to invest into that to pick up the people that the other game is not servicing properly, and then they'll use a shit amount of market share, right? Giving away their 200 years of experience. Was it 200 years? Was that the Riot thing? The user advisories group confidentiality agreement is also more focused on the aspect of leaking development know-how, and we would like to say that the reason why it would be difficult to fully release the information was not only considering the impact on MapleStory's game environment or economy. Is it possible that the development information given to the user advisory group could be abused? Excuse me, what security measures are there? So we're just talking about safeguards, information abuse, and how the information is shared. So since the information provided for discussions with the other advisory group, user advisory group, sorry, is based on past data, we decided that the possibility of use from sharing development information is very low. Nevertheless, as said in the previous notice, we have prepared safeguards through confidentiality agreements and monitoring the game activity of the user advisory group. Man, they're like on the no-fly list for MapleStory. If they do like anything suspicious, they're like under a looking glass. No, suddenly they're running MapleStory and it's using like twice the amount of RAM that it usually does. It's like, through notices which include the content of our discussion with the users advisory group and the type of information shared, we'll make sure that all users can keep track of the progress on a regular basis. Related notices are expected once every week or every other week based on the user advisory group's activity. Interesting. Discussion with the user advisory group and the development team will be mainly asynchronous. We're planning at least one online meeting per month, but it's not efficient to have all discussion in one place, of course not, and it's also difficult when considering the schedules of the user advisory group members. So yeah, sure, they're not going to do like the discussions within the dev team in the same meeting where they have the discussions with the user advisory group, of course. That would be very, very inefficient. Twice the normal amount of RAM seems normal. It's only memory leak. True. That would just be hidden. Maybe that's why they've been weaning us into getting used to being memory leak, so that when they monitor us, it doesn't feel different. Therefore, when the asynchronous discussions have progressed to a meaningful level, we will consider a notice schedule to share it with players. That makes sense. During this process, if we determine that there is something that could cause damage to players when information is released or not, we will notify you as soon as possible through a separate notice. And as explained before, we will not disclose detailed development directions during the discussions with the user advisory group. For the detailed development direction and schedule, the user advisory group will get information at the same time as the players when a homepage announcement or release note is updated. In addition, while it may be a positive thing to disclose the user advisory group's activity in real time or without any processing to reduce the information gap that various players are concerned about so that everyone has the same information, there is also a disadvantage when there would be difficulty due to the expected effect of in-depth discussion that we wish to get from the user differently, right? Some people have like a certain reputation to uphold. Some people have to be like overly polite in certain situations. You want that discussion to be as free flowing, as organic, and as as efficient as possible. And if you're putting like thousands of eyes on top of it from a player base who has a bunch of expectations, you can't really get that. In this case, user advisory group would have no choice but to be reduced to the role of opinion deliverers, who simply deliver the most popular issues, and even the development team may be limited in things that convey. Oh yeah, that's another aspect that I didn't even mention right now. But yeah, the player base will hardcore harp down on someone for bringing something up that they might think is more important, that it's being overlooked, versus something that more of the community members are saying. And then the community members, and then just imagine the amount of protest trucks will be around someone's house at that point, right? They'll find out where you live, they'll dox you, and they'll just protest truck you in. We would appreciate your understanding that this was decided not to keep our discussions with the user advisory group a secret or to give special authority to them, but to create an environment in which it is easier to have discussions. Yeah, I think this is all very, very reasonable. But of course, they have to address this super hardcore because of the level of transparency that they promised, plus the levels of secrecy in the past that have led to the situation where the player base has gotten very deceived, basically, right, and lied to, and just fucked over. So on the one hand, it is understandable that the players don't like all of this equally, because it is hard to trust when you have so much bad stuff to make up for in the past. So that is that it is a contentious topic. So it is good that they're addressing this. Again, like, I like the direction that Nexon is going with all of this. I think they're rightfully, they're taking all of these questions seriously. Communicate with multiple users, enhance communication methods, such as discussion boards instead of the advisory group. Will only the user advisory group's opinion be delivered to the development team? I'm not a member of the user advisory group. How can I share my opinions with the development team? Well, that's going to be through the discussion boards, right? Or directly with someone in the advisory group. If you're in their community, or you contact or reach out to them, I assume that will help you, get the word across. Now, before, we're constantly looking at opinions given through the discussion board and customer center, and will continue doing so in the future. Finally, when deciding as a development direction, we will balance the various sources such as the user advisory group and the discussion board without being biased towards one of them. Good. In addition, as mentioned earlier, we're preparing to reorganize the discussion board so it can be used more meaningfully. I think that's a huge job for them to do. The first reorganization is expected. Oh, did I pause it? The first reorganization is expected to be released around June. To briefly talk about the direction of the discussion board's reorganization so far. Good idea to cluster them a bit more and to have realistic discussions within a topic, rather than just have like a huge list of topics that people name themselves and then having to kind of go in there and figure out which ones have to do with which other ones, and have some sort of like arbitrary clustering, whether you say like, hey, which topics are important, boom, just post in those earlier, we're not currently selecting additional user advisory group members so that we can start our work on improving problems in MapleStory more quickly. And again, I'll readdress this. I think that's a good thing. You know, you might not have the perfect setup, you might not have the absolute perfect set of people, you know, but you have to take action now. They have to get started, they have to start with something. And then if their problems arise and the community wants things to change, then you just address them as they come along, but they have to get started. This group's activity, we will look for more developed plans for both advisory group member recruitment, methods, and rational overall operation. Good. We're well aware of players' concerns. The development team will, above all, try our best to eliminate situations where information provided to the advisory group could be abused. Since this is our first beginning activity, there will also be trial and error, but instead of sticking to the decided will, while making every effort to minimize the risk as much as possible. That we need to improve the game. Yeah. Good. I think this is like solid. I don't know who's like Max is writing this properly as well, but I assume he's mainly like translating right from the. I don't know who in Korea is like writing all of this, but it's like I think it's like really well. We are limiting, not like trying to, like we are doing this, we're going to do this, our goal is to do this, right? It's not like we are trying to make it better, like they're not beating about the bush, they're like straight to the point. We messed up, this is how we're tackling it. If you have something like this is, I think, really, really, really good. And I am, as you guys may have known, overly critical on like writing and communication and all of that stuff. So I think that goes, meanwhile in GMS. So I think that goes quite a long way. In the future, development team will continue many attempts to help the future of MapleStory, and we will try our best to provide satisfaction and trust to players by showing how the game is improved step by step. Okay, try our best. Okay, they had me until the end there. We will, right? But no, I get why they put it there. This is very solid, because I think most of these things were pretty that they get addressed, and that they use the opportunity for questions to give answers, right? That's the important part. So I think that's really solid. Overall, I think solid clarification, clear, concise communication, I think realistic answers, reasonable answers, and I think hopefully for most people who had any of these questions, at least for now, satisfying follow-up and answers to these questions.